In today's lesson we are going to continue with percentages, and specifically we are going to be finding percentages of amounts. And like last lesson, there's going to be two sections, non-calculator and calculator as well. So before we start on the non-calculator work, I'm just going to write out some important percentages. So we've got 50%, which is the same as a half. So if I wanted to find 50% of something, I would divide by 2. If I was looking for 25% of an amount, well, that's like a quarter. 25 is a quarter of 100%. So I would divide by 4. Another important one that gets used quite regularly is 10%. So 10% out of 100 is a tenth. So if I was looking for 10% of something, I would divide by 10. And the other one that I'm going to do is 5%, which is 1/20th of 100. So if I was looking for 5% of something, I would divide by 20. So these four fairly round numbers here are useful for non-calculator percentages. So if we have a look at some examples then, question 1 or example 1 would be find 70% of 120. Now using these four fairly round percentages over here, I'm going to use these to find 70% of 120. Now what will be useful for this is, first of all, instead of going straight to 70%, it would be useful to find 10%. And to find 10%, I need to divide by 10. So 120 divided by 10 is 12. And now to find 70%, well, all I need to do is times by 7. If I've got 10% and I times 10% by 7, I get 70%. So 70% will be 12 times by 7, which is 84. So my answer for example 1 is 84. So that was fairly straightforward to start off with. Example 2, let's do find 55% of 260. So 55% of 260. Now this time I'm going to need to use a couple of these different facts over on the left hand side. So first of all, a nice round number close to 55 would be finding 50%. And to find 50%, I need to half or divide by 2. So 260 divided by 2 is 130. And then if I've got 50 and I need 55, I also need to find 5% as well. So to find 5%, I need to divide by 20. So 260 divided by 20. Well, let's have a think. How many 20s go into 260? Well, I know that to get into 200, I must have 10 20s. And then I've got 60 left over, which is 3 lots of 20. So 10 add 3 is 13. And now I've got 50% and I've got 5%, which is 130 and 13 respectively. And to find out what 55% is, I just need to add these two values together. So 130 add 13 is 143, and that's my answer. And my final example for non-calculator will be finding 135% of 80. So no problem with it being over 100 here. But first of all, let's find what 35% is. So I'm going to need to do a few steps here. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly compared to the others. So 10% of 80 would be 80 divided by 10, which is 8. Then I can use that to find 30% by doing 8 times 3, which is 24. And 5% of 80, well, I need to do 80 divided by 20, which is 4. So using these two values, 30% and 5%, I can find out what 35% is by adding these together to get 28. But I don't want 35%. I've been asked to find 135%. So my final step for 135% Well, my original number 80 plus the 35%, which is 28, will give me 108, which is my final answer. So these are three non-calculator examples of how to find a percentage using these four important ones on the left hand side here: 50%, 25%, 10% and 5%. Now section A of your worksheet is non-calculator work, so questions like this. If you want to have a go at that now, I'll give you a chance to pause the video. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to some calculator examples. Okay, calculator examples. I'm only going to do 2 examples here, but I'm going to show you 2 different methods. Now, let's start off with number 1. Let's find 18% of 150. Find 18% of 150. Now, the way that I remember from school using a calculator is to first of all find 1%. Now, if I wanted to find 1% of any number, I need to divide by 100. So 150 divided by 100 would give me 1.5. So 1% of 150 is 1.5. But I've been asked to find 18%. So I need to times my 1.5 by 18. So 1.5 times 18 equals 27. So that is my answer. 18% of 150 is 27. I'm going to do the same method for question 2, and then I'm going to show you a different and quicker method as well. So example 2, find 123% of 605. So I'm going to do the same thing again. First of all, I'm going to find 1%. So I need to divide by 100. I need to do 605 divided by 100. Put that in here, 605 divided by 100 to give me 6.05, which is 1%. And to find 123%, well, I just need to times by 123. So 6.05 multiplied by 123 equals 744.15, and that is my answer. So for these 2 examples, I found 1% and then multiplied by however many percent I'm looking for. And method 2 is going to be slightly quicker. I need to do the exact same questions again. So find 18% of 150. Find 18% of 150. Now what I'm going to do here is I could say that 18% as a decimal is the same is 0.18. So 18% is the same as 0.18, and all I need to do to find 18% of something is my original number multiplied by the decimal version, which is 0.18. So if I put that into a calculator, 150 times 0.18, then I get an answer of 27, which is what I got using my other method. So slightly quicker. All I needed to do here was a quick conversion into decimal and then multiply that by the number I had to start off with. I'm going to do the same question 2, which was find 123% of 605, and I'm going to use this same method, method 2. So first of all, convert 123% into a decimal. Well, that would be 1.23. And then finally, I just need to do 605 multiplied by 1.23. So 605 multiplied by 1.23, which gives me an answer of 744.15. So that's it for today's lesson. You've got a worksheet which has some non-calculator and calculator questions for you to have a go at home. They include some worded questions as well. And the solutions are there so you can mark your own work before you upload a photo of your work onto Google Classroom so your teacher can have a look at what you've done today.